Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Super Bowl 60 is done, which means the offseason begins. And this offseason has to be an aggressive one for Omar Khan. I'll talk about how he needs to be aggressive right here on today's podcast. Also, with inside linebacker final grades and mock draft Monday. Did you get your picks on the show? Find out here. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. A reminder, the Locked On Steelers podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcasting network in the world. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than to bet on them with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, Steelers fans, it is now officially the offseason for everyone in the NFL. The Seahawks are Super Bowl champions 29-13 over the Patriots. Kind of how Jenna Harner and I talked about it would be when we left you on our Friday episode. Did not think the Patriots were going to put up too much of a fight. Thought like they'd have some couple inspiring moments, but ultimately the Seahawks were just a better built team from top to bottom. And I thought that they would outlast the Patriots and beat them pretty soundly as they did. Now, what do the Steelers need to take from that, and what do they need to keep doing and how they've been operating? We know the Steelers, they're still putting together their coaching staff. There's probably a couple more moves coming to this point, but they've been aggressive before in trying to fix things, and now I think this needs to be another year where Omar Khan is very aggressive in the moves that they make in the offseason. And when we say aggressive, we know, hey, they revamped that quarterback room quickly. Remember when Kenny Pickett was the leader of the quarterback room, and they quickly got Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. They eventually brought back Mason Rudolph as the backup, but Aaron Rodgers became the guy. They've been not afraid to just shuffle the deck and make things happen there. I think that needs to happen on multiple levels of this team. Now, we talked about on Friday about the top players that the Steelers should keep. We mentioned Alex Highsmith. We mentioned Pat Frymuth. We mentioned Joey Porter Jr. We mentioned Kenneth Gainwell, guys that they should try to either keep or just make sure they don't cut or trade away. But there's other guys the Steelers need to be prepared to move on from in ways that can try to get them more capital, not just in the sense of just cutting guys just to cut them, but seeing what returns can you get for them. They don't even have to even be a lot. If you can get solid returns to put towards your investments towards the future, I think that's the big thing that Omar Khan has to do this offseason is find a way to maximize that. And the reason I say this kind of relates to the Super Bowl is because look at some of the moves that the Seahawks made to build their team. Now, they have made some good free agent signings, but look at some of the key players that they've drafted in recent years. Of course, this past year, Nick Emanwari, the safety that was just all over the place for that defense all season long. He was a guy we talked about a lot during the draft process and how much I liked him for what the Steelers could do. He was a guy that they got in the second round of this year, but they didn't just get him in the second round. They traded up to get him. If you remember, they traded the 52nd and 82nd overall pick, so a second and a third round pick to move up in the second round to get the 35th overall pick, the third pick of the second round, just so that they could get Nick Emanwari, a key player there. And of course, another key member of that secondary, Devin Witherspoon, was gotten as one of the picks that was part of the trades that sent away Russell Wilson. And there's several other players that were part of that trade haul too. I believe Derek Hall was also part of that as well. So the Seahawks made aggressive moves to send away guys that got them picks that helped them, find answers for the team that just won the Super Bowl. And that was part of their journey. And it wasn't a right away fix. They drafted Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Derek Hall, all back in 2023. It was not a direct result of, that's gonna solve everything right then, but they needed to hit on other picks. But it was all part of a process, and that's what the Steelers have been on. Let's make no mistake, the Steelers have been making moves. They have been changing things. I think you saw in this game, maybe more than any of the other games that we've seen this postseason, having a dominant defensive front can win you football games and can win you championships. I know a lot of people say you need the offensive coach, you need the superstar quarterback. That wasn't a superstar quarterback playing that Super Bowl. That was just a defense that was whooping a lot of butt. And to be fair, the Patriots defense was given a lot themselves, but ultimately the Seahawks defense just at every level was just that much better and was able to dominate the line of scrimmage, pressure the quarterback, be able to force Drake May to be uncomfortable at so many times and stuff the run more consistently. And that's how they were able to win. Now, this doesn't mean that we're about to see an era where all defenses are going to reign superior for all time, but it does show that the narrative that defense can't win championships anymore is false, because they absolutely can. We've seen it before. And I think that's the Steelers need to not try to shy away from that, even though they do have an offensive head coach right now. So in this, what I'm saying is with the Steelers, when you're looking at the moves that they can be making, some of the guys, they need to find superstar players to add to this team on either side of the ball, whether that's a superstar wide receiver or a superstar defender. There needs to be players like that they add soon. Now, maybe they've been adding some. Maybe Joey Porter Jr. will become one very soon. He certainly was a star this year. Maybe Derek Harmon's on his way to becoming one. But they need more guys to be part of that nucleus. And that's why I think this needs to be an aggressive offseason for Omar Khan. We talked about it before. The Steelers right now are projected to have $44.9 million in cap hits if they were to if they were to keep the roster as it is right now moving forward. But looking at some of the players that they can make moves on to create space, Jonnu Smith, an easy one, saves you $7 million. You go from $44.9 million to $51.9 million. Then you could look at Jalen Ramsey. As much as I thought Jalen Ramsey was an asset at time for the Steelers, at $19.5 million cap hit with no guaranteed money, they can either find a way to rework that deal or just get rid of him or trade him to create space there. Do those two moves together, Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey, that's $71.4 million. And then a tough one that I think is a little bit harder to make, and we'll get to why that's the case in this upcoming round here. But Patrick Queen, another name that I think the Steelers need to be looking at right now, $17.1 million cap hit this year. They would save $13.3 million against the cap if they got rid of him or traded him away. That if they do those three moves alone, that's $84.7 million in cap space the Steelers would have to spend to either bring in guys, bring back guys, find ways to extend players like Nick Herbig, Joey Porter Jr., guys who I think are big parts of this core that they need moving forward. That's what needs to be done here. Omar Khan needs to make moves, and these moves, whether they're trading away guys or they're finding ways to create this cap space, but also creating draft capital. They need to get draft capital that's going to help them trade up. Now, we know the Steelers are expected to have 12 full draft picks this year. When the comp picks are officially doled out, they're not officially, but the calculators, people who have been really good at tracking this stuff and predicting this stuff, you predict 12 picks, which makes a lot of sense when you look at the formulas. But if the Steelers have those 12 picks, imagine if they could get 14 picks in there. And the 14 picks aren't going to make 14 draft picks. That's silly. You're not going to pick 14 players and then those 14 players make the team. But you can trade up about 4 or 5 of those picks, and then you can get to a point where you're like, okay, we traded up. We got a higher first-round pick, maybe a second first-round pick, maybe 2 second-round picks, maybe an extra third-round pick, while also making all those trade-ups. That's where the Steelers need to be aggressive this year. It's to find those guys that are going to be key members of their team moving forward. And maybe even in some of those positions that we're talking about that they're getting rid of. Not necessarily tight end with Jonnu Smith, because they got Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington there, 2 guys that I think are quite reliable. But you need a safety for this defense. They didn't have one all year, and you clearly showed how it could hurt them when they didn't have him. And so Jalen Ramsey, if you got rid of him and you were able to get some draft capital and that helped you move up and say get Caleb Downs or Michael Taft or or Bud Clark or one of the guys we've been talking about in this draft process who could be really good for the Steelers, maybe that can be part of the process there. Patrick Queen, if they got rid of him, could they go trade up in the first round and go get a Sonny Styles out of Ohio State, who I really like as a high draft pick they could trade up for? Maybe. But also trading up, it doesn't have to be trading up for those players specifically. You can also trade up to go finally get your superstar wide receiver, like we talked about when I gave you my first mock draft of the season. So bottom line is there's space to be aggressive, and that's what Omar Khan has to be in this upcoming offseason. If he is, it can be the Steelers' chance to get jump started and keep this rebuild going in the positive way. Because if they are aggressive and they hit, they can be back to being serious competitors more faster than and most people thought they would be. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the inside linebacker final grades on the season, because that impacts, I think, that some of the conversation around who to keep, who not to keep, and why you might not want to keep them. All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events that you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. That's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports that you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Hockey games feels different than right from the opening face-off. Speed skating races are decided by inches, and even niche events become must-watch when you are fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here after the Super Bowl. Now, you may notice I'm not in my normal surroundings, and pardon our dust here on the show as we're doing this show on the go. Went somewhere for Super Bowl weekend, but it was a fun weekend. Thanks to all my friends who were able to make it out and hang out with us. Y'all are really special people. But let's get into these final stars and skulls grades on for the inside linebackers. And I specifically wanted to do this because of how it could tie to the conversation that we're having about the Steelers needing to be aggressive. Now, a reminder, if you were following us all season long, after every single game, we gave our grades after evaluating the All-22 film of each player, and they could either have a neutral grade, or if they were good, they could have 1 to 3 stars for good to elite play, or if they were bad, they could have 1 to 3 skulls for bad to all-time terrible play. So that's where the Steelers were there. Let's get into where some of these inside linebackers ended up on the season. Now, we're going to start with an inside linebacker by name and by position, but he didn't really play too much inside linebacker, but that's his position. It's Carson Bruner. Now, Carson Bruner, really, we only gave him 1 star on the season, but he didn't appear that much as a linebacker. His main thing was as a special teamer, and as a special teamer, he was pretty solid. Now, he didn't always make the play that gave him the star, but there was one or two times where I said, oh, wait a second, we got to give that guy some credit. And so he gets 1 star, 0 skulls, 0 bus tickets on the season, C+, nothing special, but for a 7th round pick, I thought that it was good to see him contributing on special teams. Let's see how he does next year, moving up the list. Now, let's move to another guy in the inside linebacker room, a guy that people were excited to see come back. I was excited to see come back because he looked really healthy in the offseason. That's Cole Holcomb. Now, Cole Holcomb, unfortunately for him, really didn't get to click this year. He got kind of caught in some bad spots here and there. He did make some plays, and at the end of the year, I told him with 3 stars, 2 skulls, 0 bus tickets. That's good enough for a C final grade when you consider all the games that he played in. Nothing crazy there. He wasn't a really bad player, but he didn't really move the needle for the Steelers defense, and that's why he really wasn't on the field as much throughout the season. He was very much a rotational player for the Steelers, and that's not a bad thing to have. He kind of became the 4th guy in the inside linebacker rotation. But if you remember at the start of the season, there was some hype around the idea that what if they could have a really good 3-man linebacker rotation of Patrick Queen, Cole Holcomb, and Payton Wilson. Well, as you're going to see in these upcoming grades, that didn't necessarily come to pass in the way that people were hoping. Let's get to the next linebacker here. That's Malik Harrison. Now, Malik Harrison was brought in to be the run stuffer for the Landon Roberts, and ultimately, he wasn't really that bad. He was actually kind of decent. He had 4 stars, 2 skulls, played a lot of games, and had a 0 bus tickets. I gave him a C on the final of the year for that. I thought that he was solid. Again, I think that there was nothing wrong with his play. I thought that he contributed more good than he did bad. But at the end of the day, he was a run stuffer. When he was caught in coverage, it was good night Norman. He wasn't good in those guys, but he filled in on important run plays. Wasn't as good as in Landon Roberts. Landon Roberts was that dude last 2 years for the Steelers, and you could definitely see a drop off between the two. But again, a solid contributor to the Steelers linebacker room was Malik Harrison. Now, let's get to someone who was probably the least solid this year because he kind of got erased from the unit with his bad play, and that's Payton Wilson. On the year, Payton Wilson had 9 stars, 11 skulls, 0 bus tickets, good enough for a C- grade on the year. Payton Wilson was a guy who at times flashed potential, and like you could see with the speed, with the playmaking ability. There were times where it's like, oh, wait a minute, this guy's figuring it out. But he had a rough start to the year. 3 straight games he started for the Steelers' first 3 straight games. He got all skulls, 2 skulls against the Jets in the opener, a skull against the Seahawks, and then 3 skulls against the Patriots. A rough showing there. As the year went on, he did have some improved performances. He kind of went back and forth with stars and skulls in the later part of the year. His best game, though, I believe, came. This is me scrambling, trying to look at it. Yeah, again against the Colts. He came against the Colts in Week 9. I thought he went off there, and that was one of those games that showed the potential of Payton Wilson. That, like, man, if he can really make this click, there could be something there. There could be something here. But hey, he's a middle round pick. He's part of development. This is his second year in the NFL. Let's see how he keeps moving forward. Ultimately, he kind of ended the year in his last. I think the last game he played, he got a neutral grade. Last 2 games, but at the end, in his last, the few games before that, he went from 1 star to 1 skull to 1 star, and just kind of back and forth. In fact, it was alternating between stars and skulls that each week there. You want to see more consistency, and that's what he's going to need to develop this upcoming year, because he certainly has the potential with his size, speed, and athleticism. And that brings us to the leader of the linebacker room, Patrick Queen, who is a very controversial player to talk about when you talk about him with Steelers fans. On the year, as you guys know, there were some really bad games. But towards the end of the year, he really turned it up and was a consistent force for the Steelers. On the year, I gave him 17 stars, 10 skulls, 0 bus tickets. It's good enough for a C-plus grade when you consider he played pretty much every single game. And he also got a grade every single game. Like, he was the one. I think he might be the only player who did not receive a neutral grade at any point this year. But it started kind of rough. His first 2 games, he got skull performances, bounced back with a few good games, but then back-to-back terrible performances from him in weeks 8 and 9, or week 6 and 7, excuse me. Look at him. No, excuse me, 8 and 9. It was 8 and 9, or 7 and 8. It was against the Bengals and the Packers. The Bengals the first time, the Packers in those games. And those are 2 games the defense got shredded, and he was very much a culprit in those games. Back-to-back games with 3 skull performances. It was getting kind of rough there for Patrick Queen. But then for a couple of weeks, he was on and off. He had 2 stars the week after that, a skull, week after that, a star, then a skull. But then towards the end of the season, and this is where I thought it was really interesting for Patrick Queen, he had 7 straight games with star performances, which is a pretty good streak of consistency and contributions. He had a star against the Bills, a star against the Ravens, a star against the Dolphins, 2 stars against the Lions and the Browns. Played really well in those games, and then a star against the Ravens in the regular season finale, and then had a star against the Texans. I thought he kind of held his own in that game. Ultimately, I thought Patrick Queen was a solid contributor throughout the year, and you saw that consistency start to kind of connect towards the end of the season. But here's the big question for Omar Khan. Is that solidness enough for you to keep Patrick Queen around for the long term? Now, when you look at Patrick Queen and his current contract, he's about a $17-ish million cap hit. You could say $13.3 million in cap money if you can move him in a trade or cut him. And that's where it could be a tough decision, because to me, the Steelers, if you're paying anybody $15+ million a year, they need to be a regular contributor or a big-time contributor. And there's a chance, and I've said this before, Patrick Queen is young. He was 26 years old this year, I believe. He'll be 27 next year. And so he's about to enter his prime as a linebacker. Like, those guys grow into that position a little bit. And so he's going to be in the age where I think he'll be at his best. And so that's where it's going to be an interesting decision for Omar Khan. Because remember, Omar Khan, Patrick Queen was one of his first big signings. And so if Omar Khan's willing to move on from him, I think it'll be interesting to see if that's involved in a trade somehow. Maybe use him in a draft pick, like say Patrick Queen in a 4th to get a higher up 3rd or something like that. If you could find a way to upgrade there to a team that needs a linebacker, or if you say, you know what, we're keeping him, but we're being aggressive in other places and we're finding a way to make things work. And maybe you extend Patrick Queen and say, hey, we'll keep you for 2 more years, but we're going to lower that cap hit a little bit because you haven't been the superstar player that we thought that you would be when we first signed you. This way gives you some longevity, keeps you in the same organization for a bit, and keeps you around. But again, I think Patrick Queen, he wasn't a bad player. In fact, I think he was pretty solid. But again, I think that's what you run into with a lot of positions on the Steelers team that you kind of do when you look throughout all the grades. Solid is what it is across the board. And solid's good. It's good to have solid. It's good to have a high floor because that's what this Steelers team has had. But solid isn't going to win you championships. And I think that's what the Seahawks had on their side, was that they had very good players at several different positions. And the Steelers do have good and very good players, but they need to grow the very good players in different groups. And that's where I think, again, it comes down to Omar Khan needing to be aggressive with this upcoming offseason to fill in the roster with more of those very good players and those good players. And again, keep your solid ones around if they're not too expensive, because you need solid guys to fill in when guys get hurt, to be your backups, to fill in positions that you just can't afford to pay too much because you can't pay everybody everything that you want all the time. This isn't the Dodgers in baseball, but I think that the bottom line is this Steelers team needs some star power behind it, and if you're paying someone star power money, they need to be delivering. So that's going to be a big thing there, and it's going to be something we continue to explore as time moves on with the Steelers in this offseason and the other moves that they make, and when Omar Khan might get aggressive. But we'll take a quick break. When we come back, as promised, this was the first Mock Draft Monday of the season. Hundreds of you guys submitted your picks from Blue Sky to Twitter to Facebook's Locked On Steelers group. So we're going to go through, went through all of those, picked a winner. We're going to go through those and give you the picks there next on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We will be right back. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page to help you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for the show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need. Real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here today on this Monday, the first real day of the offseason, getting into what's going to be a long offseason where I think the Steelers will make a lot of moves. But of course, both of those moves are going to have to come in the draft, where I think that's the best place to rebuild, reload, and get your team stocked up back with stars. Now, we put out a post. I mention it in the show, and I apologize, but we did put out posts on all my social media at Carter Critiques. That's why you need to follow me for Mock Draft Monday picks. And as always, what you got to do when you post your picks, please post, please follow the rules. This week, we asked you to make 2 trade ups in your picks to kind of get the ball rolling there, because I do think the Steelers are going to be aggressive this year. And then post your picks, post a screenshot of those picks with your Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky post, and then make sure that you're not posting from some weird looking account where I won't know what your name is or anything like that. So we had lots of participants, but I wanted to lock in on this one because he's a person that if you know your Steelers coverage, because he's a man that talks a lot about football, and that's the man who calls himself Donnie Football, Donnie Chedrick from over at 93.7 The Fan. Donnie, I thought, put a very interesting slate of picks here for his first Mock Draft Monday, and that's why he won here. Now, it was interesting because of the directions that he went with the Steelers picks. Now, you all know me. I'm a big Mekhi Lemon guy. He was who I picked at my first mock draft. He went and got him the 15th overall pick there. Pretty solid move there. I don't know if Mekhi Lemon's going to fall that far. Some people think he might because he's not, 6'2" like some of the other guys in this class. But if you get Mekhi Lemon and you trade up there, you probably didn't trade up a whole lot of draft capital. So be it. I think that's a good move there. Another pick that he brought in, Blake Miller, a versatile offensive tackle from Clemson. When I looked at Blake Miller, I thought, hey man, like at first I'm like, well, wait a second, I'm not so sure that Broderick Jones is going to be gone, but Blake Miller's a guy who played right tackle and left tackle at times for Clemson, and he can move around the line. He's athletic, he's big. This could give you flexibility in the offensive line to say, hey, you know what? Broderick Jones, if you're not working on left tackle, maybe we bump you into guard because people have talked about that potential with him. But it gets you another guy who's also athletic. He runs zone schemes pretty well. He gets on the move pretty well. He's physical. He has really strong hands. So I like the idea of like a Blake Miller, Malik Muhammad. An interesting cornerback prospect, has kind of nickel size with 6 foot. He's solid there, but he played a lot of outside corner for Texas. Kind of aggressive there in his coverage, could be an interesting fit with what they're trying to do in the secondary. Then he went and got Zachariah Branch in the late in the third round with that extra comp pick. Zachariah Branch is a burner of a player. If you get Mekhi Lemon and you get Zachariah Branch and you have DK Metcalf, you basically have DK Metcalf, your big, strong, fast guy who can kind of get all around the field. You'll have Mekhi Lemon, who's a route running demon with great hands, who goes up and wins combat catches. And then you have Zachariah Branch, who's basically kind of like your Mike Wallace, who's going to take the top off of that defense, be explosive, and can also double as a kick returner and punt returner. So I liked those picks there. It's kind of what attracted me to this draft class. And then Donnie's second trade up came in the 4th round, trading up to make sure that he got Garrett Nussmeier. Now, I don't think Nussmeier is going to be all that or anything like that, but I do think Nussmeier could be a solid player as a backup quarterback. He's another guy that could work out as a potential Mason Rudolph. Him and Will Howard would have an interesting camp battle or two, because I think it wouldn't be solved after 1 year. But Garrett Nussmeier, he took with the 117th pick. Then Zakee Wheatley out of Penn State, a very athletic safety who can move around, hit and fly around the field. They need a safety. I think that's a solid pick there. Tim Keenan III, defensive lineman out of Alabama, another guy I liked at the Senior Bowl. I thought he played well. I will say this about Wheatley. I didn't think Wheatley played too well in the Senior Bowl week practices. I thought he needed to pop off on the tape a little bit more, but we'll see what he does at the combine. But again, I like Tim Keenan III. I thought he was a pretty good interview there. He finished out with some other guys, edge rusher Jayshon Barham of Michigan, running back Jamarian Miller out of Alabama, and tight end from Stanford, Sam Rouge. But bottom line here was I wasn't looking as much at the super late round picks. Oh, by the way, he also got a 6th round pick from the 2027 draft from the Buccaneers. So kudos there. But Donnie got the spirit of what I was looking for here. You got a star on offense in Mekhi Lemon, a playmaker on offense, potentially in Zachariah Branch. I think what could be a playmaker corner in Malik Muhammad, maybe in Zakee Wheatley as well, and then an offensive lineman that can help them in the trenches in Blake Miller. So really good picks there, but I want to remind people, these mock draft Mondays that I do, they're not because I think, oh, this is definitely how it's going to happen. This is the exploration period. I'm still watching tape on a lot of these guys. I'm still exploring a lot of these guys. I'm still learning what they do well, what they don't do well. I'm comparing the notes that I get from watching them on tape and talking to people about them that cover them or know them closely, and comparing that to the notes that I get from reading what other experts think. So it's a kind of a combination of things. And so as we're putting things together, I eventually will have a top 100 list. My goal is before the combine, and it'll be out in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But we'll cover that list here. And then that top 100 list will move. It will change throughout the rest of the offseason, because normally my top 100 list comes out usually like in April every year or late March, because I take a lot of time to put it together. But this year, with the draft being in Pittsburgh, with me being able to finally put my full effort behind the draft from start to finish, because the last several years, maybe all my years, I've covered Pitt while also covering the Steelers. So you guys know my time has been split. But this year, I'm putting more of my foot in it, and I'm trying to figure out these things a little bit earlier and then keep it moving throughout the offseason as we continue to evaluate these players and prospects for how they're going to fit in the NFL and where they might fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But again, shout out to Donnie Chedrick for submitting a mock draft Monday and getting it in there. Maybe we get Donnie on the show sometime soon. Hit him up and see what he's doing there. But thanks again for everyone participating. Reminder, we'll have a new one that I post up this upcoming Friday. You can post your mock draft anywhere from Friday to early Sunday. And then by Sunday, I usually try to get my show done. So keep an eye out, look for that next Friday. But we still got a lot to discuss, more final grades, more thoughts. Will Aaron Rodgers be sticking with the Steelers this year? It seems like more reports are coming out about that. I want to talk to that with Alan Saunders. We'll hope to try to get him tomorrow as he's on his way back from San Francisco. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Reminder, I'm your host, Christopher Carter. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. Always at Carter Critiques is my handle. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. Keep it here with the Locked On Steelers podcast.